Hey there, Ryan Reynolds here. It's a new year, and you know what that means. No, not the diet. Resolutions. A way for us all to try and do a little bit better than we did last year. And my resolution, unlike big wireless, is to not be a raging and raise the price of wireless on you every chance I get. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
Hey folks, it's Courtney. Here at How To, our hearts go out to everyone who has been affected by the wildfires in the Los Angeles area. We're working on an episode about how to rebuild your home and your life after this tragedy. If you or someone you know is in this position, we want to hear about the questions and challenges you're facing. How do you deal with insurance companies? How much time do you take off work? How do you mourn your irreplaceable objects and rebuild community? You can send your questions via email or leave a voicemail. You don't need to appear on the show. We know this is a deeply stressful time, but we're hoping to find some advice and ideas that could be useful for you right now. Send us a note at howto@slate.com or leave us a voicemail at 646-495-4001.
All of citizenship, all of what it's going to take to heal our country and our politics is about relationship. Presidents can break stuff from the top down, but only we can heal stuff from the bottom up. And that is a slow piece of work that goes relationship by relationship.
This is How To. I'm Courtney Martin. Recently, we put out a call to our How To listeners asking you to tell us about the changes, big or small, that you're planning to make in your lives in response to last November's elections and the next Trump administration. The majority of your replies were about leaving the country. A couple of weeks ago, we talked to a lesbian couple that's planning to pick up and move to Portugal. They don't feel like it will be safe for LGBTQ people to live in the United States. Check out that episode. It's called How to Become an Expat. But today, we hear from a listener who represents the other side of the coin, staying put and digging in, even if she needs some help finding the shovel.
Hi, I'm Connie. I am from the Midwest. I'm in my early 40s, been a stay-at-home mom for several years. After the election results, I felt a fire, very disappointed, very angry, and felt like I was being called to be more active in my community and just not sure where to start. I need a step one in this process.
I am so excited that you wrote in because I think so many people across the country are feeling this way at exactly this moment. Connie, will you tell us the story of your election night? Like, what was it like for you as you saw the results coming in? What were you thinking and feeling?
I was kind of in disbelief at first, a kind of denial, I guess. And then immediately my thought was, what am I going to tell my 9-year-old daughter who was just so excited that we were going to have our first female president? I knew I would have to break the news to her in the morning. So there was all these feelings, anger, disappointment, shock, sadness that I was feeling all at once.
Yeah, that was such a hard part of this for so many of us. I really relate, Connie. I have an 8-year-old and 11-year-old daughters, and we were all very invested. So I really get that heartbreak. When did your mindset shift from, okay, this is a huge shock and disappointment, to like, what am I going to do next?
I'd say it was a day or so, talking with my husband, and his first thought is, well, hey, Canada's not too far. We could just go there. And I said, no, maybe there's something we can do. Maybe we get more active and start doing something in local government.
Connie says she doesn't think of herself as a political person. She keeps her politics to herself, and she isn't much of a joiner. She hasn't even attended a PTA meeting.
I'm kind of, introverted and just never saw myself going into this field.
When Connie reached out to us, I knew right away that I wanted to connect her with a friend of mine.
Hi, I'm Eric Liu. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Citizen University. And all my work is about really trying to teach civic power, engage people who are living in places around the United States and how they can show up and really change the culture of their communities and be active in civic life.
Eric Liu is one of those maddeningly multi-talented dudes. Except you can't be mad at him because he's also genuine and kind and has built his whole life around service and joy. Eric's written a bunch of great books, including You're More Powerful Than You Think, A Citizen's Guide to Making Change Happen. He was a speechwriter and policy advisor for President Bill Clinton, and he served in the Obama administration. But with Citizen University, he's doing work that's a bit more grassroots, with folks like Connie who want to get involved but don't know where to start.
Our work is about trying to engage people who want to be catalysts. You want to spark something. You want to change something. We choose the term civic catalyst precisely because many people like you don't think of themselves as leaders. And the language we use about leadership in American life usually means you got to have some kind of title or position of authority or something like that. Not everybody has that, capital L leader, but anybody can be a catalyst. Anybody can spark in the circles around them a different way of seeing, a different way of joining, a different way of being.
Eric, I don't know about you, but I feel like as someone who's been around political and kind of organizing circles, whenever someone is a little reluctant, I'm 10 times more excited about them being in leadership. I'm like, oh, you're an introvert. You feel complicated about power. That I'm like, oh, that's exactly who we need. Is that what you're hearing?
Well, yes. And you have the hard part, Connie, which is feeling it. After the gut punch of the election results, you had the sense of, I don't know where to begin, but I need to show up in a different way. The stuff that you're like, hey, I don't know, I've not been to a PTSA meeting or anything like that before. That's the easy part. That's just learning a bunch of organizations and opportunities. But the motivation piece of it is huge. And over the next few years, when it might get discouraging or when you might feel like, is what I'm doing actually having an impact? Like that's going to matter a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that because I kind of feel like an imposter, because I have zero experience in this stuff. Like, what am I doing?
Well, if you feel like an imposter, you're in good company because there's a couple 100 million other imposters in the country right now who don't know where to begin. And most of them stop right there. So you're already awesome for having reached out to Courtney and to How To. And I can just assure you, you're not an imposter.
When you start a new civic life, as it turns out, you can overcome imposter syndrome by being yourself. Sounds simple, right? In practice, that can be really difficult for people who aren't comfortable with, say, speaking up at a crowded meeting or putting your hat in the ring to lead a committee, or, and this one is a real art for our fragmented times, having to defend your political convictions in public. But, as Eric said, there are untold millions of you out there. And every single one of you should stick around, because coming up, Eric will talk about the first steps for getting active in your community in a way that's right for you. This episode is brought to you by Defender. For those who embrace the impossible, the Defender 110 is ready for the adventure. This legendary vehicle has been reimagined with modern design for a new generation of explorers. With a striking exterior that boasts compelling proportions and precise detailing, the Defender 110 masterfully combines style with capability. The Defender is built with a durable, lightweight, monocoque architecture to provide extra strength for your next great adventure. And its tough, rigid body design exudes confidence so that when you're behind the wheel, you will too. Engineered to meet challenges head-on and tested to the extreme, the Defender empowers you to explore with confidence and embrace the impossible, whether you're off-road or on. The Defender family also features the two-door Defender 90, the Defender 110, and the Defender 130, which seats up to 8. A vehicle made to go further, the Defender 110. Learn more at landroverusa.com/Defender. Science and tech are constantly evolving, with new discoveries happening every week. On Curiosity Weekly from Discovery, make sense of some of the biggest questions and ideas shaping our world. Each week, unpack breaking science and tech news with expert guests who make it all make sense. You'll learn things like how neuroscientists are studying TikTok and your social media habits to see which chemicals are being released in your brain to make you so obsessed. In one episode, they'll cover the science of sleep and how scientists are now studying ASMR videos on YouTube to see how people's brains are responding and how it can be used to help insomniacs. Also, did you know you can fly from Florida to England on a plane using recycled plastic jet fuel? Curiosity Weekly will cover all of this, and even how there are robots that can appear to feel pain. Curiosity Weekly is for anyone who wants to understand the world a little better. It'll hit you with astonishing facts and entertain you at the same time. Listen to Curiosity Weekly wherever you get your podcasts. This is How To. Before the break, our listener Connie was telling us that she feels a calling to get involved in her local community in some way. And our guest, Eric Liu from Citizen University, explained how that kind of momentum could carry her far as she's trying to figure out where to direct her energy.
I would actually pose a question to you, Connie, about this deep motivation to do something. What are some of the things that you actually care about, that you feel something about? Forget about the country for a minute. When you think about the place where you live, what's something you actually feel like you care about?
This is going to sound a little negative, but it feels like the community is becoming kind of dangerous, kind of scary for minorities of all kinds, whether it's your sexual orientation, your race, your immigration status, the political party you voted for. There's this aggression, and I'm scared for me, my family, my kids, especially. So keeping my kids safe is number one.
Do you belong to any kinds of social groups, whether it involves your kids or it's a faith community or anything like that, where you've been able to voice what you just said to us?
I don't actually. I've never really said that to anyone besides, my closest friends and my husband.
Yeah. Wow. Well, first of all, thanks for sharing that. And I think right there is a bridge, right? So you don't want people who are minorities of any kind, whether visible minorities or, like you're saying, minorities in their worldview, to feel unwelcome. And I think that right there is a basis for invitation. If you even were to say to, a few close friends, can we get together at my place, next Sunday or something for a lunch, and actually not do the everyday small talk, but actually I want to kind of talk a little bit about something I've been feeling about just how we're living together in this community. You're not doing something that's like about politics and government, but you are actually taking a step that's maybe even more important, which is inviting other people in to a conversation about something that you're feeling in this community. And since these are people you maybe have already expressed some of this to, and they're friends, maybe it won't be as scary as it would be if you were to walk into a city council meeting and, and say the same thing. Does something like that feel in the realm of the doable?
It does. It does sound like a nice place to start, for sure.
So this organization I mentioned that I run, Citizen University, we have a program called Civic Saturdays. And these are gatherings that are happening all around the country, and we train people to organize these gatherings. These gatherings are basically like a civic equivalent to church. It's not church, it's not a faith gathering, but like those kinds of gatherings, you're invited to come in, meet with strangers. We'll sing together songs from American traditions. There are texts from different parts of our history that people will read, like civic scripture, like you might read at a faith gathering. The most important thing is that people then form up into circles, little circles of 4 or 5 or 6, and really talk about both how they've been moved or provoked or become curious in the course of the hour that just they experienced, but then also how can we convert this feeling into doing some stuff together. And we created Civic Saturdays because you don't want to just have something that feels like a city council meeting or a school board meeting where it's some official thing. We didn't want that. We wanted something that felt like it was truly people coming together to make a ritual to celebrate just the fact that we've come together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is right where I am. That's really interesting. I've never heard of anything like that.
Yeah, well, Connie, I mean, we have other programs too that are just about teaching people like you who are elders, parents, educators. We have this simple equation when we talk about citizenship that power plus character equals citizenship. That if you really want to understand how to live like a citizen, you can't just scroll and yell at people on social media, and you can't just watch the news and get bummed out or whatever. That you've got to, number one, do what we were talking about earlier, start to understand power. But then number two, you got to couple that fluency in power with a grounding in civic character and kind of practicing values of service and mutual obligation and shared responsibility and things like that are, again, high concepts. But when you put them down to the practical work of, do I show up at this as a volunteer in this migrant shelter? Do I show up in my kids' PTA? Do I help invite neighbors to a gathering so we can meet each other? Those are those values of civic character made real.
I'll bet you didn't think this episode was going to have math in it. I certainly didn't. But here we are. Power plus character equals citizenship. Such a powerful equation. And just like any equation, it doesn't compute if you're missing something. So you subtract power, you can't make a difference. Subtract civic character, the way we conduct ourselves in public and how we adhere to the traits of a good citizen, and then you only have power without a compass to show you how and where to use it. So that's one of today's big takeaways. Power plus character equals citizenship.
I have lots of ideas for like 3 or 4 steps down the way. Organizations you could be involved in, ways to get educated on an issue or whatever it might be. But I think this first step is super important. Like at the heart of all of this stuff is this broader thing that's happening in our political and civic culture in the country right now, which is we are dehumanizing each other so fast and so easily. Oh, you voted for this person, or oh, you think that? Well, I can put you in a box and you are the devil, or you are this, or you are that. And dehumanizing each other and not seeing each other as complicated 3D human beings, that becomes really dangerous. And so that idea of simply inviting a circle of friends to have a conversation about how you're all feeling, which might lead to a conversation about, well, what could we do together? Could we maybe, if your friends are fellow parents, could we like open up a bigger conversation among other parents in our school community, engage in some efforts that are about teaching compassion in the schools to young people, whatever it might be from there. But that first step, getting together with people who you already have some basis of trust with, so that together you can start talking about this, and your friends will surprise you in one way or another, right? You'll suddenly realize, oh, they had a life experience that makes them think about these issues the way I do that I had no idea about. Or even though it looks like they have their lives all put together, and like they actually suffered a lot when they were kids. Like you have no idea, right? And I just think that opening up is a habit. It's a habit of the mind, but it's more importantly a habit of the heart that we Americans have lost. And if we can rebuild those habits, first starting with circles of people we trust, like your friends, then we can start applying those habits to the next circles beyond that.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. And I totally agree. It might make me a little uncomfortable at first, but I need to step out of my comfort zone a little bit because if I want to actually contribute to the community around me, I have to kind of put myself out there a little bit.
Yeah. Well, the idea of being an introvert is, by the way, a bit of a superpower in this kind of work because people who are naturally introverted are also generally really good observers. And I think you can even start these conversations just to say it out loud. Like, hey, most of you know, I'm not the person who usually gets out there and puts herself out there. But as somebody who's more introverted, I notice stuff and I've been paying attention. And I'm especially worried for people who aren't in the majority, however you want to call that. And I think your ability to kind of say that in a way that's natural and just rooted from you. I just want to emphasize that because that thing you were saying earlier about, oh, you feel like an imposter getting involved in these kinds of things. If all you're doing is being true to you, plus a notch, like turning it up a notch. Like you said, stepping a little bit out of your comfort zone, but wanting to pursue that sense of motivation that you had, then there's no imposterness to it at all. You're being you, just in a slightly wider circle. And you're doing that because, I mean, you use the word in your very first sentence in this conversation, Connie. You feel called. You feel called to actually step in and step up a little bit. And I think that's really powerful. And it will be kind of an example that you set just by being you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for affirming that. I really appreciate you saying that. It is kind of challenging for me.
Yeah. And it is, I love that you said widen the circle, Eric, because it's like from the individual to the collective, right? Even if the collective is 3 people sitting around the table that you trust, that's a step towards becoming someone with more impact locally, which may not be as easy for introverts who really treasure their solitude. Eric, I was thinking, just so touched thinking about that. Here's Connie, this mother who's resolving to not be afraid and speak out. And I want our listeners and Connie to know you a little bit more. And you're actually raised by a mother who you lost a few years ago. But one of the things you wrote about when she died was that she resolved to not be afraid, that during the time after your father died, she really became someone who rooted in community and put her life up a notch, as you put it. Will you introduce us to you through introducing us to Julia a little bit?
Yes. Thank you, Courtney. And it really does connect, Connie, to the kind of choice you're making. So my dad died when I was 22. He was 54. And though he'd been kind of sick, his actual death came unexpectedly. And so we as a family were super unprepared. And my mom had to start this whole new life over. And she had been living in upstate New York for decades, but I was working in Washington, D.C. I was working in government and politics. And so my mom moved down to DC to be near to me. She knew me. She knew a couple of individuals there, but she had no social networks. And this was an incredibly scary thing. The fundamental fact was she was alone. And so she made a choice, kind of like the choice you're making, Connie, to not be by herself, to not be just stewing in her own frustrations. And she started seeking communities to belong to. And she found them. I'm Chinese American. My mom had been born in mainland China, had grown up in Taiwan. And so when she moved to the DC area, one of the first things she did was plug into different channels in the Chinese community. One of them was actually an alumni association from one of the schools she'd gone to in Taiwan. And so this was a group that she really got involved in. And as she did that, like one thing led to another. And that's the thing I want to say to you, Connie. Like, there's 2 things about my mom's choice and path that I think are kind of relevant. One is kind of converting that fear or even that pain into something else. And the way that that is converted into something else is joining with others. That joining is this kind of magic act. But the second thing is that one thing always leads to another. That the things that she practiced by first joining and then getting involved, and then over time, raising her hand to, help out and be useful. And then pretty soon getting elected to be one of the leaders in both those different organizations, she was practicing citizenship. Now, I'm not talking about voting in presidential elections or getting involved in like zoning decisions in the local city council, but this was small c citizenship. What it means to live like a citizen is joining, meeting people, learning how to deal with people who are different from you, learning how to compromise with people who see things differently from you, building relationships and sustaining those relationships, even when you don't agree, even when you don't necessarily like each other, but you have some kind of common goal, and committing, kind of pre-committing to staying in the work over time.
Here's another takeaway. What Eric's mom did and what Eric is suggesting Connie do is this. Number 1, step outside of yourself. Number 2, open up a conversation with a circle of people you can really trust. And number 3, pick an issue or community and just jump in there, get involved. Practice being a lower C citizen.
And give it time, giving it, months, if not a year, to just kind of get to know that issue, but more importantly, get to know the people who also care about that issue. And then the next step, I would say, that I think about coming from my mom's experience, but also is so relevant to where you'll go next, Connie, is once you have that circle, once you've picked an issue, once you've gotten to know the people, and you're beginning to work together on something. And again, that's not like some super high bar, like proposing legislation to the United States Senate. I mean, like working on something like organizing a fall festival or having a party for the teachers who work their butts off, but they don't get celebrated. Over time, what you're going to do is the next step, which is actually learning how power is flowing in your community. And all civic power boils down to this very simple question, Connie, which is who decides? Who decides? Let's say if you get involved in your kid's school, you'll ask over time, hey, why don't we, why aren't there more occasions for parents to meet each other? Who decides that? And by asking the question, you'll start to kind of write yourself into the little map of power of your school community. And you'll suddenly realize, oh, okay, yeah, there is a PTA. But within the PTA, there is this committee that's all about kind of social engagement. And within that, oh, they're looking for a new person to lead that committee. Okay, I'll raise my hand, right? But that's all about understanding that there's not just some big blob out there making decisions called they. I can't believe they decided to do this or that, or they changed the rules on this or that. There's actually very specific people in very specific places, in very specific channels, on a very specific map that you can read. And that will grow in time. This is what I was alluding to when I said 3 or 4 or 5 steps down the road, you'll get to this. It goes back to that thing of one thing will lead to another.
Eric, I love the they. That is just so evocative of so much that I've heard in the past few weeks of like, they're doing this, they're doing that again. And it's like so not productive. So I'm so glad you called that out. I did want to pause on who decides because it's so provocative. And Connie, I'm wondering if it sparks anything for you that you've been thinking about in your own community where you've been wondering who decides.
Oh, definitely. And I have had that feeling of there's this they, because I don't know how things are run. And this gives a really good starting point that is totally doable. And I think everybody should try and do this. And thank you, by the way, Eric, for sharing that story of your mother. It's really inspirational to hear that people can start just by talking and hanging out with people and getting involved in things, and it grows from there. But yeah, definitely that question, who decides, is really important from the smallest level to the highest level.
I would actually say it's even more important on the smallest level, right, Connie? Like if we don't know who's deciding stuff about our kids' schools, then we're going to feel even more powerless and helpless when it comes to national politics, right?
Listen, I can't guarantee that you will suddenly understand the national political landscape if you get involved at your kid's school, but you will understand that one school so much better. You'll begin to understand, as Eric says, how power is flowing in your community. Along the way, especially as you're testing the waters, keep asking yourself, how can I make myself useful? Even small things you do can be impactful acts of citizenship. If you're headed to a meeting attended by parents on a weekday evening, maybe you offer yourself up for childcare. Maybe you bring a casserole. It could mean so much to people, and maybe even, not to be too lofty about it, reweave the social fabric of this fraying country just a little bit. Now, coming up, one reason that people like Connie stay away from local politics? The fear of what could happen after you speak up. We'll talk about backlash right after the break. This is How To. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states and situations.
Every day, thousands of Comcast engineers and technologists, like Kunle, put people at the heart of everything they create.
In the average household, there are dozens of connected devices. Here in the Comcast family, we're building an integrated in-home Wi-Fi solution for millions of families like my own. It brings people together in meaningful ways.
Kunle and his team are building a Wi-Fi experience that connects 1 billion devices every year. Learn more about how Comcast is redefining the future of connectivity at comcastcorporation.com/Wi-Fi.
Before we get back into the episode, here's an update from our recent guest, Mia.
Hello, How To. We recorded an episode about how to work on a big project, particularly projects that have a conceptual side that might not be defined right away. I am so thankful for the process that we were able to go through. Things that have changed for me in the last few months are figuring out my saturation point and what I need to prioritize to balance the creative side of my life. There have been a lot of family stresses. And so, to be honest, I haven't dug further into this particular project that I brought to you, but I have realized that there are 2 projects that I have to do before that one of which I'm deep into right now. So I'm very excited to just get into that flow of trying things. That's the advice that stuck with me, to try things, to sit with the feelings behind the project but not get stuck in them, to not be afraid, and to talk to people about what I'm excited about and what they're excited about. Big projects are infinite possibilities, and so I just want to thank you, How To.
If you need help wrestling an unwieldy creative project to the ground, check out our April 2024 episode, How to Bring a Big Idea to Life. You'll find it in the How To feed wherever you listen to podcasts. Or if you have a different problem we can help you solve, send us a note at howto@slate.com or leave us a voicemail at 646-495-4001. We might just have you on the show. More now with Eric Liu from Citizen University and with Connie, who wants to get active in her community for the first time. Earlier, Connie described herself as an introvert, and that made me wonder whether she felt a little invisible in her community.
I guess I don't feel seen. I do keep my political views to myself. It's not something that I speak out about because I do feel like I'm in the minority a lot of times. Like I just started a part-time job a few weeks ago, and I'm pretty sure most of the management there voted for Trump. So I'm like, geez, I better not say anything about Harris or say anything about how I don't like Trump or that I'm not happy that he's becoming president again. But I was just sitting here nodding to everything Eric was saying. Yes, we need to just talk to each other. We need to hear each other. We need to listen to each other. We need to make sure people are heard and not judged. Everybody should be able to have a place and space to talk and, have civil conversations.
Connie, I want to go back to what Courtney was describing and what you said at the outset about this desire to get involved because of the way that minorities of different kinds can feel a sense of danger. Now, you yourself, as maybe a political minority, an ideological minority in your community, you can obviously very much relate to that. But then for other groups that are more visibly disfavored right now, let's take, I don't know if you know any transgender people in the community or any immigrants in the community. Do you feel called to, in fact, get involved in issues of advocating for or defending them, or is that kind of more hot than you want to get involved in?
I would love to, be involved in these things, but I do also have that fear of retaliation too from the other side. We've all seen what some groups have been capable of, so it worries me getting involved so deeply. On the other hand, I also feel that if I'm not going to stick up for these people, and myself too, like who is?
Yes. I think both halves of what you're saying are super understandable. You want to, but you're a little bit scared of the risk that could be involved and the retaliation socially and otherwise. And I think one way maybe to engage while minimizing that risk goes back to something that also Courtney alluded to a moment ago, which is to engage not necessarily in the most hot button ways, like showing up at a rally, holding a sign, but actually engage through acts of service. Let's take, for instance, a community of migrants that have come from wherever during this kind of recent surge of migrants coming to the United States. And maybe some live in your town and maybe they're trying to make their way, but they've been demonized. Well, maybe one way in is just to find out what are the local churches, YMCAs, social service nonprofits, what are the organizations that are doing some work to serve some of these migrant parents and kids and communities? And maybe it's a matter of you going and joining there and helping to lead a little session teaching English, or spending time with the kids in one of these communities so that their parents can be looking for work or, applying for their paperwork to stay in the United States, whatever it might be. But it's through acts of service. That might be one way to engage, in a sense, on behalf of, in defense of these minorities that you feel a sense of commitment and obligation to, like you say, if I'm not going to stand up for them, who will? But without it being something that, puts you immediately on Twitter or whatever as a target for social media.
Mm-hmm. Well, Eric, Twitter doesn't exist anymore. So Connie doesn't have to worry about that. But I love that so much. And Connie was actually making me think, you approached our show saying, should I run for office? Should I go to law school? So now I'm like, are Eric and I lowering the bar way too low for you? Or do you actually find this kind of relational entry point comforting? Because I don't want to kill any big dreams, but I also think maybe you would find this just a more approachable way to start.
It is definitely approachable. And what Eric was just saying about, the acts of service, helping, perhaps migrant families and whatever their needs might be. I felt my heart surge a little bit there, so like I feel this in my heart. That is something that I could absolutely see myself doing. And this is not lowering the bar at all, because I really didn't know where everything could lead. I was looking into classes, and actually I registered for a political science class, which is going to be starting soon.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, just to give me kind of a background. Maybe that'll turn into something, maybe not. Maybe I'll just educate myself.
I also wanted to read, Eric, a quote from you about fear, because we were talking about fear, and you've written, "To be not afraid does not mean being in denial or numb or nihilistic. It means being willing to recommit to each other, to the possibility that we together can make something better than this."
I love that you are leaning in. I love that the phrase you just used, you can see yourself, what you're becoming. You can see yourself stepping into bigger citizenship. At this point right now, what either scares you, or what do you feel like you want to get stronger on as you begin this journey?
Great question. I guess it's no secret now that I'm not super comfortable talking to groups of people. So it would definitely be a challenge for me, just to open my mouth, to speak up, speak loudly enough for people to hear me. I guess if fear is people won't hear me, people won't want to listen. A good place to start, of course, is people that do know me, that do already listen to me, that might have the same mindset as me. Somebody that is already helping the community in some way. I think that I would be a little less nervous, a little less scared talking to people that are more open-minded like that.
I'm really glad you vocalized that, Connie. And two things I guess I would just share in response. One is you reminded me of one woman actually who we've trained in our work at Citizen University named Caroline Sayre, who's here in my town of Seattle, who, like you, isn't one who likes to go and give public speeches and rally people to do stuff. She's not that kind of personality, but she's the kind of person whose her deeds speak volumes in a way that kind of become contagious. She lives in a part of Seattle that's had a little bit of a, influx of lots of newcomers and lots of young people. And put simply, there's just a lot of trash on the ground. And she just decided one day, instead of complaining about all these newcomers in a neighborhood, she was just going to start organizing on Saturday morning. Well, not even organizing. She was just going to start going around and picking up trash. And she wore a colorful vest. She, had a big bag. She had a little picker thing, and she just walked around and just, and maybe the first time she had a friend. But then over time, it was a little bit of just a Pied Piper effect. Like, she gave no speeches about this. She put no notices out, but a few other folks just started joining. This became the basis for her discovering, oh, I actually have this kind of power. It's not the power of being the extrovert who stands on stage at the podium and gives fiery speeches. It's the power of somebody who just leads by example and leads with commitment and integrity and just keeps doing this stuff. And over time, people see you doing this stuff and they realize, oh, there's something kind of satisfying about that. And they join, right? And I think that's one thing that is going to happen for you. And then I think the other thing too is always thinking about your growth and development as a citizen in small, digestible chunks. You're not trying to go from here to becoming Martin Luther King Jr. That may not even be the destination, but I'm pretty sure over time you'll get more and more comfortable talking to groups of from 3 to 5, from 5 to 10, from groups that are all people you know to groups that are half people you know, and eventually groups of people you don't know at all. But, bite-sized chunks, that'll come over time as long as you're committing to stay attuned to who you are, listening and attuned to others, and figuring out what are acts and deeds that you can do that will do a lot of your talking for you.
Wow. Yeah, I have to mention also that I was reminded of my own daughter when you were speaking about Caroline. My daughter actually started a kindness club back in 3rd grade, and they would, just recruit people to be kind, invite somebody that they don't know to play with at school, pick up trash on the playground. When you were talking about Caroline picking up trash, that's what it reminded me of. And I'm just thinking, wow, my own daughter is inspiring me too.
Yeah. Well, I bet apple doesn't fall far from the tree on that one, Connie. My guess is she's learned that from watching you. And I was also thinking about, I love Eric's advice to be attuned to yourself and where your gifts are and follow in that direction. But I also think if you do want to push yourself out of your comfort zone, there's nothing more motivating than knowing that your daughter is watching you, right? Like, I think the things that I've grown the most on in the past decade have all been because I thought, I don't want her to grow up thinking that she has to stay in this kind of box. Like, I want her to see a model of someone who does something brave. So it sounds like you're already doing that in so many ways. So, Connie, I hope this conversation has left you feeling seen and more powerful, because I think both Eric and I really feel the power of your heart and your motivation in this moment.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I feel very seen, very heard. I don't feel as intimidated as I was at the start. And you both have given me such great avenues to go down to start this process and be a good model for both my kids to look up to, both my son and my daughter, to see and have those same values as well.
Thank you so much, Connie and Eric, for this fortifying conversation. You can find a link to Citizen University in our show notes and check out Eric Liu's book, You're More Powerful Than You Think. a citizen's guide to making change happen. And listen, I know a lot of you, a lot of us, truth be told, are feeling pretty precarious in this political moment, maybe even a little hopeless. Like, does small c citizenship even matter anymore in a country that is feeling so unstable on so many levels? Well, first of all, you're not alone if you're feeling that way. And that's just why I know it matters for us to keep getting out there, speaking up, doing even one small thing that makes other people feel seen and heard, like Connie is going to do. I'll leave you with one of my other favorite writers on matters of civic action, Rebecca Solnit. In her book, Hope in the Dark, she writes, "People have always been good at imagining the end of the world, which is much easier to picture than the strange, sidelong paths of change in a world without end." So, get on those sidelong paths, friends. I'll see you there. How To is produced by Rosie Belson with Kevin Bendis. Joel Meyer is senior editor and Derek John is executive producer. Merritt Jacob is senior technical director and composed our theme music. Charles Duhigg created the show. Carvel Wallace is my co-host. I'm Courtney Martin. Thanks for listening.